the reasons that journaling can help you through that is what I found is because it helps you first, if you haven't found him or her yet, find that inner voice and listen to that person and then trust it.
Welcome to This Way Up, the podcast dedicated to supporting parents and caregivers navigating the complex world of mental health. I'm Andrea, and each episode we dive deep into the conversations that matter, exploring the challenges, triumphs, and transformative journeys of those facing mental health struggles within their families. Whether you're here for expert advice, inspiring stories, or just a little boost to get you through the day, we've got you covered. So grab a cup of coffee, kick back, and join us as we find the bright spots in the mental health journey, because we're all climbing our way up together. Welcome back to This Way Up. Today's topic is journaling, and it is touted as one of the most therapeutic ways for us to work through our emotions and stabilize our mental health. But if you are like me, you might be a little intimidated by it. I don't know. I can tell you that I have visited a ton of Barnes and Nobles, and I have several very beautiful journals out there that maybe have a handful of pages filled, because when I sit down to journal, I don't know exactly what to write. My brain kind of freezes. I have tried the journal prompts on the internet. I have tried to just free write, and I never really feel all that different. But today's guest, Samantha Hawley, the podcast host of Journal Entries, is a journaling expert, and she shares with us not only the benefits of journaling, but also a 5-step method that she has come up with to help get all of those thoughts that are in our head out onto paper. So I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, please share it, like it, subscribe, do all of those good things. Thanks. Welcome back. I am excited today to bring on Samantha Hawley, who is the host of the podcast Journal Entries and business owner, Samantha Says, where she talks about journaling. And I am very excited that she is going to share with us a bit about how journaling affects our lives and can hopefully make our lives better, and bring some confidence in the space of those of us who have tried it and continually feel like we are maybe not that successful in it. So welcome, Samantha.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'd like to start off with your story as to how you got into such a unique business.
Yeah, I would love to start off with actually what you said about how we don't feel successful with journaling all the time, because that's where I started. I used to journal, maybe like 10 years ago or so. I was the type of person that I would journal affirmations. So those are like the I am statements, or I would journal gratitude in the morning. Things like I am grateful for my health, grateful for my family, things like that. And that would help me feel good for like an hour or so. Then I would just kind of go about my day. This was at a time in my life where I was working at my corporate job, and then I started to work for myself as well. I was bouncing around where I was living. I've lived in Albany, New York, Boston, Massachusetts, my hometown, the Outer Banks, most recently prior to moving back home, also Maine. And so journaling was just a way in the mornings to like kind of ground myself, but I didn't really feel any different. I actually started journaling once I had my son. I had a COVID baby. So he was born in October of 2020. And that was just a very interesting experience. And it was all that I knew because he's my one and only child. And so, going to all of those doctor's appointments, I was going in alone. And not only because of COVID, but I wasn't living near any family or friends. It was just me and my husband at the time. I did all of that, and we moved from Maine to the Outer Banks when I was 7 months pregnant. So I think I went to 3 different hospitals during that time. It was just a lot. And I was always the positive, what's the phrase? Positive Pam, positive Polly, whoever, just always optimistic, Once I had my son in October of 2020, it was like I had this realization that I no longer like came first almost. Like I had, and I wanted to put my son first, which meant I needed to speak up for myself. And all of these emotions came flooding in of just normal emotions, I think, of like overwhelm. I was just like so overwhelmed and I didn't know like what I was doing as a mom, how to balance all of the things. And so I remember I was sitting on like our living room couch and I was like, I just need to get whatever is in my head out. I excused myself to go journal and I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to write. I just need to get it out. And I couldn't speak it at the time because I couldn't even put words to it. But I locked the door because I wasn't sure if I was going to cry or like scream or what. I wrote vent sesh at the top. And then I wrote, I feel like I'm dropping all of the balls, motherhood, career, just like my self-care as a wife, all of the things. And I wrote for 3 pages. So that was one of the times where it was just kind of like what I call a brain dump of just getting it out there. By the end of those 3 pages, I didn't have any solutions to any of those things, but it was the first time that I really honored real emotions. And I wasn't just jumping straight to gratitude or jumping to like the hopes and dreams, right? It was like the life is hard. I'm not feeling great. I'm feeling anger in some situations. I'm feeling jealousy in some situations. And I just validated myself, which was a huge shift for me. And so that validation is what kept me coming back occasionally. It's not the start of like when I started showing up every single day, but it just felt so good that I came back, like a week later. And then I started to notice that I was getting so much clarity around what I did want and started creating like these micro steps almost like, oh, well, maybe I should have a conversation with this person, or maybe I should like try this or do that. And when I really started to journal more consistently was right before I got a divorce. And that was when my son was 9 months old, was when I got a divorce. And it was because I was just having so many revelations of how I was being treated and how I wanted to be treated and the life that I wanted. And so the way that this became my business was because as I was, prior to going through the divorce, then going through it, I was documenting the fact that I was journaling. And on Instagram, I was doing time lapse videos, so it looks cool, how you journal really fast. But divorce was like the hardest decision of my life, yet it felt like the most sure of myself I've ever been.
Interesting.
And people started telling me like, it looks like you're going through a glow up and you seem so like calm, even though I have full custody of a 9-month-old and who's not sleeping and all of these things. And they started asking me like, how am I doing my journaling? And also how can I help them like through their situations? And so that's when I started asking myself, like maybe there is something different about the way that I journal. So I just started looking into that. And that's how I started creating my journaling membership and some group programs and private coaching.
Okay, so this is going to go in a little different direction because you said something that I actually said a number of things, but you said that you started journaling by these gratitude practices or I am, which we always hear how healthy those are for you. However, a little bit later in the conversation, you spoke about how journaling helped you honor your real feelings. And I think, especially as women in this day and age, but I'm sure all humans, we are told and guided to be grateful for what we have, but that can sometimes mistakenly ignore the non-pretty emotions, those raw emotions. And I think it's beautiful that you found in journaling a way to still honor those real emotions that we need to feel instead of stuffing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever forget the time that I was sitting down with my son and I forget what he was doing, like what triggered this emotion in me, but he was laying on me. And at the same time of me feeling like, oh my gosh, my son is like laying on me and this is a moment, I felt so much rage inside my body because it was just a season of like so many meltdowns and so much crying and like talking back, as much as a 3-year-old can talk back. And that's just a perfect example of how before I would have just told myself like, nope, ignore the rage, ignore the blood boiling inside of you, like just be grateful, grateful, grateful. And it's not that I don't do gratitude journaling anymore. I do it in a way where it's more of a visualization where I can physically experience it. And that's how I'm able to shift like the state that I'm in and the way that I'm feeling. But I totally believe that two things can be true, especially with feelings, right? Like we can have that mom rage or mom guilt or whatever, and feel so grateful for our kids. We can be lonely and happy at the same time.
And to recognize that, and to have a place that you can recognize some of those not so pretty emotions, but really, really recognize that they exist. I mean, we all have them. And even though we may not be proud of them at the time or understand them, they're there and they're not anything to be ashamed of. They're there. Like you said, you can still have a 3-year-old that you absolutely love to snuggle with who is driving you bananas or whatever it is, right? I think that's really great. So journaling has helped you. Why is it important for other people to start some sort of a journaling practice versus just jotting things down here and there?
Well, I think that you can probably tell just so far from our discussion that I journal a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I don't journal my to-do list, which is what I used to do. I don't journal just, bullet points. The way that I journal is beneath surface level. And I think that is so important because that is what's holding you back from feeling how you want to feel. And that can be for so many reasons. But the reasons that journaling can help you through that is what I found is because it helps you first, if you haven't found him or her yet, find that inner voice and listen to that person and then trust it. So often we just seek outside advice or outside permission slips, if you will, and just feedback from outside. We're venting to people and whatnot. And we don't even take a beat for ourselves to listen to ourselves. And in my journal, I think a very important piece of this is being honest in your journal and being honest about the rage that you feel. I also am so petty in my journal. Like I'll share like whatever I'm truly feeling, even though consciously as I'm writing it, I know that that's like not true about that person or whatever. I'm just like, if it's what I'm feeling, I'm letting it out. And that's key to just releasing it. Otherwise, it's going to be pent up and it holds you back from your career goals. It holds you back from the relationship that you want with your kids. It holds you back from the way that you want to show up and people pleasing and of procrastinating and all of these things. And so I think that the biggest benefit is listening to yourself. You can truly get so much, if not all of the direction that you need and like the next steps and the clarity going forward from within. It's just that you need to know how to tune in. And I do that through journaling. And I do that because it slows me down. Physically, there's actually science behind the brain and hand connection of slowing down enough to physically write. I'm all for like typing and digital journaling as well. If that's going to get you to start, go for it by all means. But if you can physically write, it slows you down and you'll start to experience yourself. It almost feels like you're talking to yourself. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I
do talk to myself.
You do. Yes, you'll do that physically. And yeah, journaling, like it takes longer to write. And so as you're writing, it's like your mind thinks faster. And so you're like having these little conversations and ideas will come up and, you're going to start to be way more solution oriented if you're not already. And it just, you get to this place where you work through an emotion. You don't stay stuck in it.
So how do you even start? You say your type of journaling is below the surface and it's finding your voice. For those of us who don't know where our voice is, or we've listened to the outside world for so many years, it seems very intimidating to allow ourselves to come forward like that. How do you start?
I want to touch on the word intimidating because I went to a conference. It was a Brendan Burchard conference. I think it was back in 2017. It was before I was doing all of this, what I call strategic journaling. And it was the most interesting experience because I felt like I had a secret deep inside that I didn't know yet. But I also didn't want to uncover it. And if you've ever been to a conference like that or like a Tony Robbins conference or anything, it's very transformational and inspiring. And you quote unquote do the work while you're there. Like they have you tap into yourself. And I walked in on day one before anything even started, feeling like I almost was about to have a panic attack. Like my body was going through something and I've like never had a panic attack before. I was like, something is happening. And looking back, I think / know that my secret that I just wasn't ready to uncover it was I was engaged at the time and I should not have gotten married. I knew that well in advance before I even got married and had my son. I shouldn't have gone through with that, but I just wasn't ready to uncover that. And it's just so intimidating to face what you're afraid of, right? Like our biggest fear is loss of connection, among other things. And so it can be scary to go beneath the surface. However, underneath it all is that emotional freedom and that so many different types of freedom that will set you free. And so if you can be brave enough to start, you will get that sense and direction to get what you want out of life. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get a divorce. It just means that, you'll get to have the confidence, make quicker decisions as well. But your question was like, how to get started?
Yeah.
So the first thing that I would say is make it personal. Like you opened up with, a lot of people aren't consistent with it. And that's why they don't journal. They've tried it and they're like, oh, it's not for me. Or they have like 5 journals collecting dust on their bookshelf. And I think it's because they tried journal prompts, but it just doesn't resonate. You don't want to talk about a sunny day when it just doesn't feel like it's going to do anything for you, And so my first step for you guys would be to do what I call an emotional brain dump. And what this is, and I actually would recommend typing this because if this is your first time, it might take longer. So typing would make it quicker. And it's just basically venting about anything and everything. Feel free to do your to-do list. Feel free to type about at your relationships, like what's going on with your parents right now, with your kids, with your school, the teachers at school, your partner, anything and everything. Jot it all down. So that's step 1. Step 2 is to scan it. And I'm not one that goes back to read my past journal entries, but with this emotional brain dump, what you're going to do is see what words you said often. So you're going to recognize that you maybe said the word overwhelmed 7 times, or you said a specific name of somebody, a bunch of times. You're going to notice that you talked about a certain pattern of things happening, like maybe people pleasing a bunch of times. And that's where you're going to start. So that's going to give you your starting point because the fact that you brought it up a few different times tells you that it's important on some level. And that's going to be the starting point that'll help you go a little bit deeper. And you can even just start talking about that experience. Like, okay, I said, overwhelmed 5 times. Just what am I overwhelmed with? And it might feel like repeating yourself, but you'll do this, the next day. So that would be step 2 is scanning. And those are like your specific main topics that you should dig into. And then the third tip to get started is habit stack. And so realizing that consistency does not mean daily. Consistency is just any sort of pattern that you can keep up with. So even if that's once a week, that's consistent. If it's 3 times a week, that's consistent. So find a pattern that resonates with you and then stack that with one of your existing habits. So maybe on Sunday mornings, it's your quiet time. You get up before the kids, you have your sip of coffee or your cup of coffee, hopefully more than just one sip. And then that is when you journal instead of watching the news potentially. Just once a week on Sunday mornings with your coffee. For me, I journal about 4 to 5 days a week right now. And I do it when I'm having my pre-workout in the morning, like as I'm doing that. So maybe for you, it's before bed. A lot of people like to journal right before they get into bed, which I think is a great time because we as human beings are more emotional at the end of the day because our tolerance level for emotions decreases because we just go through so much throughout the day. So that's a great time to do a brain dump. So maybe for you, it's like the last thing as soon as you get in bed, that's like your cue, your trigger is pulling the sheets up, you journal. So have it stack with something that you already do and choose that pattern. That consistency can feel good for you.
So I'm going to take a step back a little bit when you said to do the emotional brain dump or emotional dump, I think is what you called it. Journal prompts for me were always, they didn't resonate, as you had mentioned. But also, I could sit in front of the journal and just stare at it. So there's a point where it's like, okay, I need something to write about. Like, do you eventually get into a state where you can just have those personal conversations and maybe you don't feel so weird about it?
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up. So you're right. Some people might be like, yeah, I mentioned overwhelm 5 times, but now what? Like how do I start writing?
Right.
So yes, eventually you will feel more comfortable with like, okay, here are some questions. And you like kind of what I say is prompt yourself. But going back to when people started asking me of like, what are you writing about? Like, how are you journaling? I realized that there were specific like questions or prompts that I was prompting myself. It was like ways that I was asking these questions no matter what I was going through. And I call it a journal prompt flow because it's a flow. It's not just like one prompt that I would answer. It's like, okay, I'm starting with this one emotion or situation and I flow through it so that by the end, it's a complete journal entry, which might be one paragraph, or maybe some days it is a full page. I have no limits or anything, but I do have a document that's free. I can give it to your listeners and it breaks it down into 5 different prompts. So I can share that quickly. The first one is awareness, and that's just bringing awareness to the actual feeling. So what is the actual situation? What is the feeling? Maybe this is like a bullet point list of like what's happening potentially, or just maybe it's freestyle writing of just like venting about this person and what he or she said, or why your kid is so whiny and how it's feeling. It's just bringing awareness to it. The second prompt is meaning. This is where you start questioning, what are you making this situation or emotion mean about you? It's also where you start thinking about judgments. Are you judging yourself for this, or do you think other people are judging you? A lot of times people say, like, it doesn't matter what other people think, but it does. Like, we can pretend like it doesn't, but it is ingrained in us, you know? And so we honor that. We can't get to the point of clarity in what we want. And so many times people, think about how they're feeling and immediately jump to what they do want and the solution. But so I take you through meaning. And then the next one is curiosity. And this is where we say, is that true? Are those judgments true? Are those expectations true? Is that meaning accurate? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. The next one is clarity. So this is where we ask like, okay, based on the awareness and any judgments or meaning that you're tying to it and the curiosity, now what is it that you actually want out of this situation or out of your life or based on this emotion that you're currently feeling? And the last one is action. And these are micro steps. So what can you do to then get closer to that clarity that you had? And an example that I love to give about micro steps is conversations. So a lot of times we might think, having a conversation with someone is one step, but I break it down into 3 different steps. One step would be reaching out to that person and saying, hey, can we have a conversation? The second step, for me at least, I lose my train of thought when I'm in a conversation with somebody. And so I need to write an outline for myself of like, why am I having this conversation? What are my main points? So I can literally open it up in the middle of the conversation and like come back to that. And then the third step is having the conversation. And I'm not going to do all of those at once. I'm just jotting them, all of my ideas down, and I'll choose one to do that day. So if the acronym is AMCCA, I say always make cotton candy again. It makes no sense, but I remember it.
It's like we're in third grade again.
Yes, exactly. So I can give you that document for your listeners. But that's how I would take your emotional brain dump and then anything that hits for you guys and actually journal through it.
Well, so there is a process. And so for those of us who like to have some sort of, I think it's more so of a process. And that's where I know personally get stuck. The journal prompts that I read online, again, they're kind of frivolous. Like I feel like sometimes I'm just writing, but yet you do get stuck in beforehand. So having a process is great. Now you have a workshop coming up, and can you tell us a little bit about that workshop and what you provide in it?
Yes. So it is called the Self-Sabotage Detox. And this is a group coaching program where we dig deeper into the ways that we self-sabotage. And the way I became interested in this was when I was going through my divorce, I just got really curious around the habits and behaviors that I have. And for me, I know that people pleasing is like one of my top ones. And I knew that it showed up with like saying yes when I wanted to say no, right? But also in like, I reflected back with my partner's family. I just felt in that situation, but also in larger groups, like I never stood out. And also like it wasn't by choice. It was like I always just felt the energy of the room and became that. And whatever everybody else said, I agreed with that. I was just like, I don't know. I just blended in and I was like, I want to be someone. I want to like, stand for something. And so I started questioning these things and really journaling about the different ways that I self-sabotage. And I became educated around that there's actually 10 different ways that human beings self-sabotage. And we learn them and absorb them into our like neurology before we're 7 years old. So it's not just like, oh, we picked this up, in that relationship. It's behaviors that kept us safe as kids. But anyways, we identify the ways that we self-sabotage and the unique ways that are highest for you. Like maybe you don't resonate at all with people pleasing, but you procrastinate or you quickly fall into the victim mindset or you're a perfectionist. That's a big one for a lot of people. So we just take a look at that and we journal through how it's impacted you, but most importantly, how it's showing up in your life right now, like real time, how it might show up in the future so that we can be aware of that going forward and it doesn't kind of like hit us out of nowhere. And then my favorite part is we learn the strategies to actually disrupt each of these saboteurs, if you will, in real time so that within 10 seconds, you're able to recognize it and move through it. The whole goal with journaling and this self-sabotage detox isn't to never self-sabotage. It's not to never feel anxiety ever again. It's to feel it, acknowledge it, and be able to move through it quicker. And so with this workshop and group coaching program, it's exactly that. It's learning how to disrupt it and move through it quicker.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I didn't realize there was so many different ways that we could self-sabotage. That's kind of scary.
Yes. The first way that we all have is the judge. It's how we judge ourselves and judge others. And it's so powerful that it activates all of the other 9. But yeah, it's a really great program. This is the second cohort or group that I'm running. And the first one is wrapping up now. And everyone is just loving it. And I was like, I have to do this again because the transformations are like people went from like just being so shy and never standing up at their office because they, felt like they weren't their boss, right? And one person she has a disability, and she ended up leaving because she felt like that was better for her mental health than staying in a job that, she could hear people talking about her. She got an email once by mistake that her boss had said to somebody else. And it took so much of her avoider and people pleasing and the high achiever in her to overcome that. And so that's just one example. But now she went from that, processing all the emotions behind that, right? Like that experience especially comes with a lot of emotion. So I partner all of that with journaling through that. And then to the other side of what is it that you do want in creating that type of life for yourself?
Oh, that's amazing.
Without sabotaging yourself along the way.
And where can people find more information about your workshop?
So you can find all the information on Instagram. My Instagram is samantha.s.says. And in the link in bio, there will be a link to where you can find more information.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I am ready to go buy
another journal. I have several, but I need a new one because, and to start trying this, because I think there's probably a lot hidden in there that I can even express. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad. Thank you for having me.
If you are interested in learning more about Samantha's upcoming journaling workshop, you can go to her Instagram page, which is at samantha.says. That's SAYS. Additionally, she has a free workshop that she has recorded, which is located on her website at www.samanthapenkoff, and that's P as in Paul, ENKOFF.com/balance-PTO. Both her Instagram page and her web page will be located in the show notes below. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to This Way Up. I hope you're feeling a little lighter, a little brighter, and ready to take on whatever comes next. Remember, the journey of mental health is all about progress, not perfection. So keep climbing. And don't forget to celebrate the small wins. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little lift.